Welcome to episode 15 of the Developing Life podcast. As we grapple with complex global challenges, the world is yearning for deeper connections and more meaningful actions. How can we utilize creativity and strategic insight to mobilize real societal change? Today, we are thrilled to host Heidi Hackemer, a renowned provocateur and problem solver known for her fearless approach to injecting more humanity into systems. As the founder of Wolf and Wilhelmine and the Creative Alliance, Heidi has advised top global companies like Nike and Google and has tackled pressing social issues through innovative strategies. Heidi's commitment extends to her personal activism, particularly towards Indigenous causes, as her role as an advisor to the Thunder Valley CDC of the Pine Ridge Reservation. She shared her insights at prestigious forums like the MIT Media Lab and the Elemental Accelerator Conference. Join our host, Heather Crank, as we delve into Heidi's journey and explore the intersections of strategy, creativity, and social responsibility.
Thank you so much, True. Hello, Heidi.
Hi, Heather. How are you?
I'm great. It's wonderful to have you here. I first learned about you from my friend Cassandra, who discovered you at South by Southwest. And she loved your talk so much that she said, you have to get this woman to come out to Bend Design. And so I started investigating you and, well, not investigating, but learning about you. Investigating is a little weird. Not stalking, but, you know.
It's okay. It's all right.
And I came across your YouTube video that spoke about leaving your job in New York and then going out. I'm seeing, see if I can remember this, into the Badlands or out into nature. Mm-hmm. I would love to hear you talk about this experience. It was so beautiful and profound, and I immediately wanted to connect with you.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having me, Heather. It's awesome to be here. Let's talk about that. So I was 31 years old. I was living in New York City and everything was fucking fabulous. It was a great life. I was working at an agency called BBH with amazing people. We had just launched Google's biggest campaign. It was like their launch campaign, when they launched Google Chrome. I was the strategist on that campaign. The campaign was global. I was flying all over the world. And one day I was sitting at my desk and this voice popped into my head that said, buy a truck and drive around America. And it was just this really strong intuition. And within a month, I had quit my job, packed up my apartment, bought a Ford F-150 and started to drive. Now, this is before Instagram van life. Okay, so this was not pretty. It was not cute. You would see other people who lived on the road. We would call each other road rats. Like there was nothing fab about this. You would duct tape things together. There's a lot of duct tape when you're living in a truck. There's to leaks and everything like that. And so for about 2 years on and off, when I would run out of money, I would put the truck at a airport and I'd fly back to New York and freelance, but then I go back to the truck. Mm-hmm. I drove around the country and part of it was going to the Badlands and doing that. But I put in, I think, 30,000 miles crisscrossing the country for a couple of years. Eventually that turned into motorcycling across the country, which is just a whole nother level of vulnerability. And it was a walkabout in the truest sense. It was a time where I was really questioning, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. What am I doing with my work? What am I doing with my energy? I didn't know if I was going to ever go back to New York. It was very open. It was like anything can come out of this. Mm-hmm. And what did come out of it was I decided that from a work standpoint, a lot of came out of it, but from a work standpoint, what came out of it was I don't want to be working so downstream in advertising anymore. Mm-hmm. I want to go further upstream, use the tools of brand and brand strategy to work with companies to help them understand who they are and how to better activate it. Because my theory of change was, if we are going to make things better in the world, we really need to change the players in capitalism and get them operating in better ways. So out of that came me founding my brand strategy shop, Wolf and Wilhelmine.
I love that story so I love it. So when you were out in the Badlands, what do you think was your most challenging moment, and what did you learn from that?
I was being challenged actually more driving through the American South. And that was the first time where I really realized how divided the country was becoming. This was during the Obama Mitt Romney election, which feels so quaint now compared to what we're dealing with these days. But I remember tuning into local radio stations because something that I was really fastidious about on the road was taking in local media. So when I would stop somewhere, I'd read the local paper, always wanted to read the local op-eds to see what was going on in that community, and also tuning into local radio stations. And I think it was a big aha moment for me, and also challenging, was I'm driving around the country, falling in love with the country and falling in love with people, and really being warmly embraced everywhere that I went. And then I would turn on the radio and there was such vitriol on the radio. And that was confusing to me at the time. Like that was quite difficult. Now there was also emotional difficulty. Like I'd basically been running fast my entire 20s. There wasn't an assignment or an airplane or a meeting that I would say no to in my 20s. So I was dealing with profound burnout. That was making me question, what am I doing in my life? So there was also a lot of personal challenge going on as well, realizing that there was a way that I was relating to work that needed to change. There was some, as we all have to deal with, I think one of the great decisions we make as adults is, do we deal with our shit or do we act like it doesn't matter? And I was like, nope, you have shit. You have to deal with your shit. And then there was also just this cultural challenge of, wow, like there's some real anger in this country that I didn't realize existed living on the coast.
True. So when you came back, like when you made the transition back and started your company, what was that like? And why did you choose to start a company?
I actually started a company on accident. And I have to be very careful about this now because I just started consulting again and I have a feeling I might accidentally start another company. So what was happening was I was like, I love my freelance life. I love being untethered. I love doing this thing. My whole thing was like, I'm just going to like pitch projects and then assemble teams and then disassemble, and I'll go back out in the truck and I'll kind of live this like nomadic existence doing it that way because that really feeds my soul. But one of my Achilles heels is that there's sometimes I just fall in love with talent. Especially younger talent. And I love teaching. I love mentoring. And there was some younger talent that I was like, I really want to work with these people, but I know that they cannot take on the instability of being freelance, that they need a home. They need a 401k. They need health insurance. It's not fair to put someone at that phase in their career. Because this is before where we are now, like where everyone's kind of doing their own thing. This is when this was a little less like where work was more structured. And so I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to hire my first employee and she's young. And it's not fair to ask like a 23-year-old to jump into freelance when she's never done anything like this before. I need to make sure there's a structure that she has a regular paycheck and health insurance and a 401k. And then it's like, well, we have one, we may as well have another one. And so it just kind of started like, and then it became real. So it was a little bit of an accident starting the company.
Oh my God, I love it. Okay, so I think it was about this time that you and I were interacting a little bit more. And what happened to this company?
Well, I got a weird phone call in 2015. It was a call from the White House. And it was the Obama White House, to be very clear. And first I hung up on them because like, hi, we're calling for the White House. I was like, yeah, fuck off. And I hung up the phone, which, oops. It was bad. I was like, oh shit. God. Then they called back and no, really, don't hang up. And so I started doing some volunteer advising for the Obama White House. And then when Trump got elected in 2016, all the Democrats, diaspora throughout the country, and some of them ended up in the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And so they invited me out there to build their engagement team. And so, left the company in the hands of the partners. But running a company is really difficult. It's super hard. And at the end of the day, everyone decided, you know what? It's the best, like, let's sunset the company. And that's the best for everyone involved. And I think, like, that's fine. I see people now. I remember before I closed my company, looking at people closing companies and being like, oh my God, like, how, I can't believe you're closing your company. Like, are you, like, did something happen? But then sometimes it's just, you know what? It was a great run. It was good. And now it's time to move on to other things. And so I think, that was as difficult as it was at the time to close the company, because there was a lot of, I had a lot of investment in that company. In retrospect, I am so glad we closed the company. And I'm so glad that I was able to move into the next era of my life.
Right. So as I've watched your career grow over the years, and you are consistently focused on sustainability, and you advocate for different cultural groups. Most recently, you've spent a lot of time in the indigenous spaces. I'm itching to hear about how that went and what you've been doing and what you've been up to.
Okay. Thank you for asking about that, because I feel like indigenous, everything does not get nearly enough attention that it needs to get. So I really appreciate you making a platform to talk about it.
Sure.
So my involvement with the Lakota community in South Dakota started when I was in my truck, because I was driving around, and again, all the hate, all the like negative stuff was coming through. And so I asked people in my network, would you introduce me to people that you know, because I just want to get a gauge of what's going on with America, and also what people feel about the American dream. Right. So my brother, who works at the University of South Dakota, and South Dakota has the most, no, it's probably not true, because of the Southwest has a very large indigenous population. 9 reservations are in South Dakota. So there's a lot of students that go to USD that are from the reservation and from the tribal homelands. And my brother has been at USD his entire tenure. And so he has a lot of indigenous mentor people around, and people that he mentors and things like that. So my brother says to me, Mr. American history professor, we couldn't be more different, but I love him. He's like, if you really want to understand America, you have to understand what happened and what's going on and what the state is today. So he introduced me to people that live on the Rosebud Reservation. And so I've really been involved since I was like 32 years old, for like the last 12 years. In the last couple of years. And so basically for the last 12 years, indigenous culture is all about like people vouching for each other, right? So I became friends with Damon and his family. Damon was friends with Stacy. Stacy then introduced me to his niece, Tatewi. Tatewi runs Thunder Valley. So it's like kind of this chain of like how you work your way through Indian country. And basically, I've just always said to Damon and Stacy, and now Tatewi, like, how can I help? Like, what do you need? Right. And that's basically been my stance. How can I help? And they will call me and they'll be like, hey, we need some money over here, or someone could use a conversation with you here. When the protests were happening up in Standing Rock, we brought supplies up to Standing Rock, because that's also a Lakota tribe. And so it's different than the ones I work with, but they're related. And so we went up to Standing Rock, and Damon and Stacey helped me get the supplies up to the Standing Rock. So it's always been the stance of how can I help? And now I've been advising Thunder Valley, which is a nonprofit on the Pine Ridge Reservation. I've been advising them for almost 5 years now, and doing a lot of work with them, which is really great. Happy to talk about any of it. So,
I would love to hear more about how, if people want to get involved, or if they would like to participate, where spaces they can go, or how can they connect to organizations or platforms that are championing what they need.
Yeah. So the great thing about what's been happening in Indigenous culture over the last couple of years is that there's such a vibrant Indigenous community on social media now. And we as non-Indigenous people can look in and hear their stories and hear their history from their perspective and hear what they need directly. What I really love about working with Thunder Valley, and I highly recommend to donate to Thunder Valley because they're doing really great work, thundervalley.org. they're a frontline organization. They're on the front line of working with the Pine Ridge community, which is the Oglala Lakota, every day. And, it's complicated talking about Indigenous people because on the one hand, Pine Ridge is the poorest county in the United States. It has, before Haiti went through some of the recent violence, it had worse living conditions than Haiti.
Wow.
It's astounding to me. Like, it blows my mind that people are like, I'm going to go to Africa and help people. I'm like, go to the fucking reservation if you want to help people, right? Or go to Appalachia. Like, you don't need to go somewhere else. We have plenty of stuff. Go to some inner cities. Like, we have plenty of work that needs to be done in the United States. I think sometimes we as white people avoid that because we very quickly have to face our, like, what we have gained by other people being pushed down.
Yes.
And so it's much easier for us to go somewhere else and then fly away versus saying, like, I'm literally going to go down the street or to the next state over and recognize that, like, what these people are going through is because I benefited.
Yes.
My little soapbox on this. I get very annoyed sometimes. You do not need to go somewhere in another country. There's plenty of work to do in the United States. So Thunder Valley is frontline in those Oglala Lakota. I mean, when you look at addiction rates, life expectancy, health outcomes, really dramatically bad place. And housing, it's just tough. It's a really tough place. But then on the other side, and I want to make sure that we don't just like poverty porn people because that's a really shitty thing to do. Yeah. On the other hand, you have this amazing culture. You have people who literally, the Oglala is the tribe of Crazy Horse who fought Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn. This is the tribe, the Lakota, who white people call the Sioux. This is the tribe that was one of the most resistant tribes to the U.S. government and fought them the hardest. Oglala Lakota is where the occupation of Wounded Knee happened in the 1970s. So there's a lot of activism in this community. They're kind of like the hardcores of the Lakota world and of the Indian world, Indigenous world, excuse me. And so there's a lot of power in this community. The culture is incredible. The wisdom. I think it's really funny. You walk into sustainability spaces and all these sustainability practitioners are like, I have an idea. Regenerative agriculture. And it's like, yeah, no shit. That's indigenous agriculture. Like, that's like, they literally, like, they have most of the answers about like how we should be related to the earth. We just don't listen to them. Right.
Yes.
So as much as there are a lot of issues in these communities, I don't think we should only look at the lens of their issues. We also have to understand there is so much wisdom and power and resilience in these communities. And frankly, these communities deserve to thrive. And I think we should all try to be a part of that.
I love that. I just wonder if there's some way to get the word out. Well, I guess we're doing it right now to connect people who are climate activists with the indigenous populations and get more of a dialogue going. That would be an amazing bridge.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, and I think Patagonia's New Home Planet Fund that is being run by Dilafruz Kanukieva, like, that is a good place to go. There's a lot of grassroots indigenous work that's happening in the Northeast and Maine. The organization I work with, we are just now implementing a program called Lakota Land Systems that is basically all about this. How do we have better relationship with Unchimaka, which is how you say grandmother earth. So like, it just takes a little bit of Googling and you will find plenty of indigenous people who are on the front lines of this. Also, there's been a lot of movement lately to give stewardship of national parks and national lands back to indigenous communities because they can steward it better than anyone. We should be, advocating for that. So there's a lot of just a little bit of Googling. There's a lot of ways that you can get involved and help with bringing indigenous leadership to the forefront.
I love that. Thank you, Heidi. I actually have been watching a lot of programs about the lands going back to the original owners and how beautiful it is to watch what should have already been happen. It's kind of like setting things, well, sort of right, not 100%, but kind of right in the right direction.
Right. Directionally the right way. Yeah.
Yes. So a question I have for you about empathy which is in all of your work, including what we just spoke about. My friend Pedro Ruiz talks a lot about the future, and he teaches kids or speaks to colleges. A question that keeps coming up is with the rapid changing of technology, the environment we live in, climate change, everything that's happening, how do we educate younger people around picking careers that are grounded in empathy, grounded in positive outcomes? And how do we help them overcome this kind of charged, fearful dynamic that's happening right now because of all of the tech giants kind of creating their own arms race and climate change and political and economic instability? There's so much going on. So I would love to hear your thoughts around this.
Yeah. My thoughts on this have a couple different dimensions to them. On the one hand, I don't think it's as much about choosing careers and places of work that have empathy versus cultivating empathy in people so that wherever they end up working, you can change the culture of where you're working.
Yes.
Or you can influence the culture of where you're working. If we have this bifurcation between the empathy businesses and the non-empathy businesses, I also think the non-empathy businesses are probably more apt to win because they're probably going to be a bit more ruthless about winning. So I think the question I would be asking is, what are we teaching children? What are we teaching high schoolers? What are we teaching post-high school, whatever form they may take? How to have a more symbiotic relationship with the world around us? How do we change our relationality, not only with other humans, but also with our relatives that are non-human? Yes. And then bringing that into the work that we're doing. I have this constant debate in my own head with other people. It's a discussion more than a debate. Sometimes it turns into a debate, right? Of how do you make change? Do you make change by being in the system and trying to change it from the inside, which is more incremental? Or are you somebody who is bashing on the outside of the system? And I think it's really interesting looking at some historical figures and how they navigated that. So if you look at someone like John Lewis started by bashing from the outside. And then John Lewis decided to go inside the beast, right? Barack Obama bashed from the outside, community organizer, then went into the belly of the beast. AOC kind of like, went in. And I agree with Brian. We need both. I think we need change to be hitting from all over the place, right? And so a question that I have for people is understanding, or a challenge I have for people is understanding where you are best suited to affect change. So for me personally, when I get into big organizations, I don't do very well. I'm not very good at navigating them. I don't enjoy it. I get frustrated. I get pissed. It doesn't bring out the best in me, right? When I'm in, bigger organizations. So I know for myself that I am best banging from the outside, not like Greta Thunberg. Like she's an activist, right? I'm not an activist. She's an activist, but I'm best like provoking from the outside, right? Whereas other people are really good at getting in there and like messing with the mechanisms to get the thing to change. And I think you need all of it. I think you need all people. So I try to have empathy sometimes for people in big organizations. Sometimes I get frustrated with them because I'm like, you're not moving fast enough. You're not being brave enough. You're not being strong enough in this. But that's a different beast than somebody whose job is to bang from the outside. And so I think another thing that we need to think about in this era of like, how are we training up people to affect change, infusing as many people as possible with empathy and relationality, but then also accepting that change takes all different types, banging from the system from all different directions, and helping people find where they are best suited in that, as Ken just said. Ken, hi, I'm so glad you're here. As Ken just said, on the spectrum of change, where do you fall on the spectrum of change where you can be the most effective and the most powerful?
I love that. I love the idea of that it takes so many different people to affect change. There's this story or this narrative that I see often that it's specific people who have a lot of influence and power. But if you look at history, that's not the truth. The truth is the biggest change usually comes from the ground up. So I love that idea. If you are coming from the outside, how do you see yourself positioned in this particular fight?
So right now, where I'm finding that I'm the most effective in the work that I'm doing right now,
yes,
is I'm good at right now. The only people I work with right now are founders and executive directors and CEOs. That's it. And it's not by choice. It's that's actually who's incoming on me right now are people that are in that position. And everyone that I'm working with right now is seeing something in the system that is like fucked up. And they're like, we need to make this better. Right. And so when it comes to the indigenous nonprofit, like they're literally trying to fight colonization and work towards indigenous sovereignty and liberation. They're activists, right? So what I'm doing is I am supporting them and helping them, taking what's already very potent in their organization and just organizing it a little bit so it can just be even more potent, right? And so, and then they go and they bang against colonization, right? So, yeah, my role right now, banging, is to support the bangers and help them bang even more powerfully. And I do potentially have a contract coming up that's with a really big company. And that's going to be one where I'm going to start to like be banging them from the outside. And we'll see what happens. We'll see how it goes.
Oh, I'm very curious. You just dropped a very tantalizing tidbit. So you're like a secret weapon. You're kind of stealthy in a way.
I like being stealthy. I'm more effective when I'm stealthy. And I've learned that the hard way, you know, like I've gone inside and I'm just not as effective on the inside. I'm just not. And that's been painful sometimes. Like that caused some like painful work experiences for me. And I'm not saying that to like bash any organization or company that I was in. It's just like, wow, like that's not where I'm at my best. And so understanding, like I have this Post-it note right here that I have on my desk just to remind myself where I'm at best. It says nomadic provocateur. Like,
oh, I love that.
That's, you know, I said that to someone like 2 months ago and I'm like, actually I should write that down to remind myself that like, that's where I'm at my best.
I think that's really important to understand that that power comes in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. Yeah. And that you're not less just because you operate in a way that is comfortable for you. I know myself, I have a lot of self-criticism. If I don't feel like I'm out there being really powerful and aggressive, but that's just not me. That's not my MO. So again, hats off to you, Heidi. It's beautiful the way that you are very aware of who you are and how you move through the world. It's something I have admired about you for a long time.
Yeah, that's really kind of you.
It's true. Another area I kind of wanted to touch on, and a few years ago during the pandemic, we had a lovely discussion around women in business. And I just would love to dig into some of the unique challenges women face and how you personally have overcome some of those obstacles and what you have faced being in a leadership role as a female.
I
know.
Okay.
It's a good one. Bring it.
All right. Yeah. So where to start with this? I think I think for the first, I'm 45 years old right now. And first of all, let me shout that from the rooftops. I'm 45 years old. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not scared of it. In fact, getting older is fucking great. So like, just this whole idea that we should be ashamed of our age when we're women is bullshit. I think I'm at the phase in my career now where it's a little give zero fucks. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, fuck off. Like, don't fuck with me. But you know, I also have a shaved head and I wear all black and And I'm opinionated. So, that helps. Okay. But let's talk about when I was younger. When I was younger, I was absolutely like sexually harassed up the wazoo in my 20s. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Every agency I worked at, it was like sexual harassment city. Okay. That's not fair to say. Every agency I worked at, I had some sort of sexual harassment issue, even when I didn't realize it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get then in my 30s, I think the thing that was really difficult for me in my 30s as a woman leader was stepping into leadership and being afraid that I was being a bitch. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And I really had to learn that it is okay for you to have an opinion. Mm-hmm. It is okay for you to tell people that they didn't do something well. It is okay for you to say you want something done a certain way. Mm-hmm. And that does not make you a bitch. Took me years to get comfortable with that. And I made a lot of management mistakes along the way because I was so afraid of not being liked and not being called a bitch that like I wouldn't express exactly what I wanted. And then people would get like, they didn't know what to do. And then I'd be like, wait, you're not doing it right. Then I'd rush in and I'd be like, hey, wait, this is how it needs to be done. And it was that kind of seesawing back and forth that was really not great management. Right. Mm-hmm. I've also been in organizations and companies where it is obviously a boys' club and women, like it's difficult to be a senior woman in those organizations. And that can get very frustrating. Mm-hmm. But what I would want to say is that some of my biggest supporters, I would say across the board, the biggest supporters in my career have been overwhelmingly men.
Interesting.
And I would say that I have equally gotten fucked over by women as I have by men, if not maybe a little bit more by women. Mm-hmm. And we don't talk about this a lot in the sisterhood. And I think it's because we're still competing with each other because the patriarchy only allows so many slots. So we're assholes to each other.
Yes.
And I've been guilty of that, right? Like, I'm not saying that I've been innocent in this. But it's something that I've had to, this is the first time I've ever said it out loud, that actually women have fucked me over too.
Okay, sure.
And because it's a scary thing to say. And it's not that I don't love women. It's not that I don't support them. I actually understand why, because the system causes us to fight each other.
Oh, yeah.
So one thing that, I think we all need to think about as women is like, how can we support each other? But then let me say one more thing. I've also been in groups where it's like, it's women only and like, fuck men. I don't agree with that either at all. I really don't. I don't think that we need to be driving that kind of division. Yeah. Let's be good humans together. There are good humans across all genders or gender typologies. And me being on a battle against men, I can battle the patriarchy, but it's not always helpful to just, me having like a fuck men thing is not the way to go. Then like, I just want to like call out somebody who's on this call, my friend Ken, who joined. Like, Ken is an amazing man, right? And like, there's just nothing like, if I had a fuck men mentality and I couldn't have the relationship that I have with Ken and the friendship that I have with him and mutual support, like that would be a huge loss, right? Yeah. So we have to also be careful of that war mentality.
I can't agree more. And for me personally, the patriarchy does not equal men. It equals a system that is not necessarily healthy for anybody. So I'm with you 100%.
Yeah.
So you've overcome these challenges being in leadership role as a woman, and you're moving up the career ladder. What advice would you give other females who are on the same track as you, or a similar track in a leadership role, maybe sharing some of the same struggles and difficulties? How can they be more resilient? How can they continue to move forward? Because we need more women in positions of power just to even out the horizon line. How would you advise somebody?
A few things. Find good mentors. I've had fantastic mentors in my career. And I think I probably have like 20, right?
Oh, really?
Well, there's the main ones, right? Like my mentor Pele and my mentor Emma. And then there's like 15 other OGs that like I can just call and be like, hey, and I've cultivated that. So cultivate that. And then cultivate the rest of your network as well, as much as possible. Be careful of who you put around you.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to rise, there are less people around you that are truly looking out for you, truly have your back.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean like be an asshole to people or be like suspicious, but my circle right now is probably at the smallest that it's ever been, but it's so high quality, right? And I don't mess around with people that might be messing around with me, like,
Yeah.
And I've learned to trust that spidey sense of like, I don't know if I can trust this person. I don't know if they're the best person to have around. Instead of me saying, no, Heidi, you're wrong. And I've realized like, no, actually, you should listen to that. Like maybe that person doesn't deserve your time and energy. And so it's not about being like hateful and spiteful to people at all. Like it's all love. Right. But there's only so many people that you really, really let in, or you really, really let get close and you really trust. And it took me a while to understand that.
Yeah, me too. I understand that completely.
Yeah.
So how do you cultivate your network
now?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of cool because this happened to me today. Like one of my old friends, my loves people, right? She's like, you should meet this guy. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. So like, and then I meet him and I'm like, he's fucking awesome. Right. And so what starts to happen is like those good people that you really trust, they connect you to quality people. So again, I'm sorry, Ken, I'm keep putting you on the spot here, but like Ken was introduced to me by my friend Stacy. Stacy's like she's my people. Right. And so if Stacy's like, you need to meet this person, I'm like, okay, of course. Right. And so I think and then you need to do that for other people too. So for me, that's like a really easy cheat. Like if Colleen says I need to meet someone, or if Stacy says I need to meet someone, or now if like Ken says I need to meet someone, it's like, of course I'm going to meet that person. Right. And I think we know the people that I flow with are like, it's important that good people meet good people. And so those connections just start to happen and start to flow. So that's probably the if I'm being honest, that's probably how my network is being cultivated right now.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are almost at the 45-minute point. So I'd like to invite our audience to drop any questions that they have into the chat. And in just a little bit, I will invite you to turn your camera on if you would like to speak to Heidi directly. So I'm just going to give people just a second to see if we have any questions here.
Yeah, and I haven't been paying attention to the chat at all. So if you asked a question in the chat, like I didn't see it. So.
Yeah. I'm checking right now. Oh, okay. I've got Milka. Milka, go ahead.
Hi, I'm not going to turn my camera on if it's okay.
Completely fine.
I'm in the process of getting a haircut. And Heidi, I love your haircut. When I gave birth to my first child, that's what I did. I cut it so short and I loved it.
It's free.
Yeah. Yes. I wanted to touch base on the fact that first of all, I'm glad that you mentioned about your leadership, about the women that were in your life. And I want to say that how I'm glad to see that women are more supportive of each other. The culture is changing, thank God.
It is.
And women are very nurturing. They're if you find good mentors, they're amazing. You're lifted. So I very much believe in women leadership, provided that we toss out that 80s attitude of women being caddies. So if we toss that out, I think we're in the right track. Second of all, what I want to say is this ageism. I'm somebody who's constantly keeping up with technology, constantly learning, constantly upgrading myself. And I feel like, wow, I'm just gaining more and more experience and knowledge. And what a fantastic asset and value I can offer. And unfortunately, companies don't realize that. Why? Because they are looking at the biased opinion and the general stereotype opinion that, oh, if you're past age 40 or 50, you're doomed. No, there are people who are absolute gems, and they just get better and better as they get older. How can we break this misconception that that the older we get, the more value we can bring in, especially for people who are still driven, who still, are very interested in contributing and growing. There are many of us like that. And I get so upset whenever people say, oh, I'm too old, or I'm old for this. It's like, no, you're not. You just lost your motivation. So there are people who are motivated. They still want to keep going. My question is, how can we, as women leaders, turn that around, that how amazing women are as they get older, and how much more value we can contribute and uplift everyone and take us to the next higher level? That's what I wanted to bring to the table. Thank you so much. I'm done asking my question.
Milka, I'm so glad that you piped up while getting a haircut. I love that. Getting my haircut's like one of my favorite things. So I appreciate the sanctity of that moment. So here, I was just having this conversation with someone earlier today. So my brain's kind of fresh on this topic. I think we have to talk about the value that older people bring. I think we do. I think we have to be vocal about it. And I've certainly been vocal about it in the last few months as I've started consulting again after coming off of Oatly, where the conversation that I've been having with people is like, yeah, I've pretty much seen it all, and I will get shit done. And I will get it done with an efficiency and an intelligence and a clarity that you're just not going to get from a 30-year-old.
Correct.
So like, you bring me in to get it done right. Yes, Ken, wisdom. Like I'm going to bring in the wisdom to the situation. I'm also very honest about, this isn't what I do anymore. So for example, when I was in my 20s and I was a strategist, I was what you would call like a culture or a street strategist. Like I would get a brief and I would walk the streets of wherever I was, whether it was Hong Kong or London or New York. And I would come back and be like, okay, this is the vibe with the millennials or whatever it is. And like, this is what we need to do. I'm very open now that that's not what I do anymore. And for me, and I'm not saying that people my age can't do that. I think they can. But for me, I'm very clear about, this is what I do. And this is what I'm really fucking good at. And this is what I'm going to bring in other people to do, because it's not what I do anymore, or it's not what I've ever done. Right. And I think what we need to do, Milka, is we need to articulate our value and not be afraid to say, you know what, me personally, I don't know, maybe other 45-year-olds do. I don't really get TikTok. I don't. Right. So you're not going to hold that against me. I'm just going to admit it. And I'm going to hire somebody that does. And then I'm going to do some magic with the stuff they give me, because that 25-year-old that's telling me all about TikTok does not understand how to operationalize that into a long-term strategic plan. Like, they don't know how to do it, but I'm going to work with somebody and we're going to make it happen. So, again, I think it's just like, we have to say what our value is. And I found where I've got my most power in this era is also saying, this is what I don't do anymore. I used to. You might have known me as this type of professional 10 years ago. That's not what I do anymore. This is what I do now.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah. And we can get things done so much quicker and faster and with more efficiency. And yeah, I totally agree. Comparing myself to when I was in my 20s and 30s, where I was running around like a chicken with no head. Now I'm laser focused. Boom. I see through the problem and I see the solution right there and then. I appreciate that. We need to have a movement about that. Me Too movement. Some type of movement. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Milka.
Thank you, Milka. Okay. Looks like, we're getting a lot of questions. Let's see. Can you tell me how to pronounce your name, please?
Yes, me?
Yes, you.
Yeah, hi. My name is Swati.
Thank you. Go ahead.
First of all, Heather and Heidi, thank you for such an insightful conversation. I mean, some of the things you've said mean so much and they connect a dot so well. Thank you. And taking out gender from, good and bad people and mentors. So thank you so much for that. I've got twofold questions.
Okay.
One question is that I would love to know that how do you keep that fire alive towards social impact? What I've felt is when I was relatively younger, I was like, okay, I have to change the world. I'm a strategist. I can also do a work which changes the world. And I found that far too slowly kind of lessen down, which I don't like. So one is that I would love to know that how do you keep that thing alive? And second thing is, I'm an immigrant. I moved here a couple of years back. I would love to know that how to expand the network when I don't know many people here. I've not worked as of now much. I would love to know that how do you find mentors? Because I feel that is extremely, extremely important.
So yeah, thank you for both of those questions. I really appreciate it. The first one on how you keep the fire going. And I'm not an expert in this, but let me tell you something I learned from the indigenous folks that I work with. They laugh a lot. They laugh more than anybody that I know. And they tease constantly. I'm always getting teased when I go out to South Dakota. I walk on site and they're like, hey, it's Cece, our colonizer cousin. I'm like, thanks, guys. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a constant state of like teasing. And even in the most serious conversations, someone will bust out and have a moment of laughter. And that is resilience, right? Like that's how you keep going. And so I don't hate the word balance. It's a little overused, but like, look, I know, and maybe just because I'm getting older or crankier, like I don't work on weekends anymore. I can't. If I work on a Sunday, like I am brain dead on Monday. Like my body can't handle it anymore. So I make sure I'm walking my dog and getting on my motorcycle on the weekends and getting off the screens. And I try to be more diligent about that. And then I also try to just be like, it's okay to take steps back sometimes, that's okay. Mm-hmm. So you don't always have to be a warrior. Warriors need rest. For your second question about how to build a network, I find, especially when I'm going into a space where I don't know a lot of people, I will meet one person. I'll say, could you introduce me to a couple of people that you think I should talk to? And then the network, and just keep asking for introductions. And that can be really helpful. Now, make sure when you show up for those introductions, you've done your research, you have good questions. So you're somebody that I want to introduce you to somebody else. Like I know you're not going to waste their time, right? But asking for introductions is always good. When it comes to finding a mentor, I said this once at a BBH event like 10 years ago, and I almost got kicked out of the event because it was like this like young strategist event. And everyone was like, oh my God, like young, I'm going to be there. And I put up a slide and I said, don't ask me to get coffee. Don't, because I know what's going to happen. I know I'm going to come off the stage because it's all junior strategists and like 50 of you are going to be like, can we get a coffee? And I'm like, I don't have time. But what I was trying to say to them, the point of the slide, which might have gotten a little bit lost, was your best bet at finding mentors are people that have worked with you and are willing to vouch with you. I don't have a single mentor that I haven't worked with. So Pele was my planning mentor for 3 years. Emma Cookson worked for her at BBH. Like Johnny Vulcan worked for him at Anomaly. Like there's not a single person that I consider to be someone that mentors me that isn't somebody that I actually worked on a project with. And that's how I really think that's how you cultivate it. I don't think you cultivate it by like having a random coffee with somebody. I don't think that's how you cultivate it. So look around you and like, oh, my first mentor ever, my sister who's 9 years older than me. It was like, she knows her shit, my sister and my brother who's 12 years older than me. Those were the first people that mentored me. And then as I met people and worked with people and proved myself to people, then I added more mentors along the way.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for answering all of these, and they make a lot of sense. Thanks.
Of course. Katie Fitzgerald, what are you doing? Love seeing your face.
Oh man,
oh my God. We need to do a copy, Katie. Okay.
Yeah, I always love hearing your stories. I always walk away feeling like so inspired and so lit up inside, and just thank you.
Same.
To share. Actually, I have a small follow-up question on the last thing that you said, and then I have another question, which is, do you actually ask people, would you be my mentor?
No, I don't. Okay. I don't. Maybe some people do. I don't.
Okay. I've always wondered that. And then the other thing I was thinking about is just like you're 31 and it was that time in the world when X, Y, Z were happening. Like if you were suddenly 31 again, given the way the world is now, what would you do?
Okay, first of all, I love that you're suddenly dropping Zs versus Z, Katie. I don't know what's going on with you right now, but
Lots of things.
lots of things. Okay. I would drop out of all of it and chain myself to a bulldozer that's like trying to dig up fossil fuels somewhere. If I'm I'd be like, fuck this. And I think I'm getting close to it. I don't have kids. You know what I mean? Like, I don't. So, like, the world's fucking burning. Like, I would, that's probably what I would do.
Okay.
So, yeah, I know. Isn't that a horrible thing to say?
No, I love it. It's honest. And I'm going to go look up bulldozers.
Right. I mean, at one point I was thinking about getting a law degree so I could fight through the law. Like I took the LSAT and I took the LSAT when I was 42. I was like, there was a really moment where I thought I was going to go to law school to fight via legal systems. So maybe I'll do that still. I think my LSAT score is good for another like 2 years. So.
Chelsea, hang on just 1 second. I've got one question in the chat I want to ask. She's been waiting, and then you can go next. Heidi, this is from Liesel. Liesel is asking, we keep seeing politicians and brands KCing up to groups like Indigenous people. It can be a double-edged sword. What have you learned about how to guard against these powerful parties appropriating and using folks for their own ends in exploitive ways?
I mean, through the lens of Indigenous, like, look, in Indian country, if you want to work with Indigenous people, like, you got to show up. You literally have to show up. You have to go to the middle of nowhere in Kansas or Oklahoma or South Dakota. You need to show up. You need to show that respect to do that. I mean, Indigenous people are pretty savvy about being appropriated, like by corps and politicians. Like they know what's going on. Like they're not stupid at all. So sometimes it's like if they're letting it happen, it's because they're getting something out of it because they need resources or they need the power. They need something, right? They need something to come out of it. So I tend to trust Indigenous people. Like if the partnership's good for them, then there it is. That's enough for me, you know? But if they're rumbling about it in the background, then I'm going to pay attention to that too.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Heidi. Chelsea, go ahead.
Hi, Heidi. I'm a real life 31-year-old, so I'm so excited to be jumping into this conversation. It felt very tailored to me. And I'm a brand strategist, and I'm coming out of this period where I've just been like balls to the walls running for the last year. So anyway, super relatable entry point. And, I'm looking at my F-150 era and trying to figure out what that looks like. And something I recently, very recently, last week, realized is the last 4 or so years, I've been doing this incredibly deep, empathetic research that has fueled me in so many ways. And none of it has been about people that don't live in cities. It's been so focused on that. And I'm a Montana kid. I grew up in the sticks, and I've been thinking about, especially in this conversation, as you're talking about, hey, why are you fixing things here? We have a tremendous amount of problems. And I can't help but be I actually, I'm looking at politics and I'm looking at social issues and looking at all these things, I guess, for a starter, trying to translate brand and strategy tools into an impact related practice or just being. What is step one other than F-150, which I am strongly considering?
Look, here's the cool thing. All the stuff that you learn being a brand strategist, you just got to redirect the tool, right? So everything you're learning about analyzing culture and people and competitors and landscapes and companies and organizations, you just kind of, okay, let's just nudge it over into a different space. You're doing the same shit. You're just doing it with a different context that you're doing it in. So if you want to flip it over, it's really easy. And then it goes back to an earlier part of our conversation, Chelsea, of do you do work with existing clients in a way that is bringing more empathy and more fight to the table? Like, there's a lot of different ways we can talk about things. I hate to, like, there's no one way to tell a brand story on any client, right? You can tell the brand story in a way of like, hey, you need to do more. You need to think about the power you have. Do it. So you can, again, do you do it through the system, through the people that you're working for right now? Or do you like say, nope, I'm only going to work for nonprofits, and there's no right or wrong answer. It's just where you want to aim or how you want to do it. I do it with both. I work with nonprofits and I work with for-profit companies. I do it both ways.
Thank you, Chelsea. Okay, so we just have a few more minutes left here. I want to be really respectful of Heidi's time. If anybody else has any questions, and we've got 5 minutes left, so now is the time to either drop it in the chat or turn on your camera or your mic. Let's see what we got. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Ken.
Hey, great to see you. To be brief, I guess I'm reflecting on some of your responses. I'm curious, what does your definition of community look like now? And what does your definition of grace look like now? Perhaps compared to a previous point when you were starting on your journey.
Oh, Ken, you always ask these questions. They're so good. I've been thinking a lot about community lately because my whole adult life has been nomadic. And then I go to South Dakota and I am immediately swept into this community. And suddenly I'm picking up kids from their track practice because someone has to go get them, and making sure that, the grandmother gets from the car because she's in a wheelchair. So helping her, like, I get thrust into a community in a way that I haven't my entire adult life, because my entire adult life has been skipping around the world. Right. And it's really made me question, did I do it wrong? Like, should have I lived closer to my sister and my nieces and nephews so I was more integrated into their lives? I've really asked myself that question in the last couple of years. Should I really double down and join the library people here in rural New York, rural Pennsylvania? Like, what do I do? And I beat myself up about that over the last couple of years, that like maybe I was too vapid in the way that I designed my life. And then I started to give myself a little more grace. And I started to realize, like, okay, your community is all over the country. It's actually all over the world. How are you going to, what I was talking about a little bit earlier, tighten up the circle to the people that really matter, and then make sure you're taking care of them, making sure you're texting them and saying, hey, how are you? Thinking of you, sending them handwritten letters, whatever it is, showing up. Like, I'm really big on showing up right now. Like, if you're in my group, I'm showing up more. So community has changed in the fact that I think I used to have a very shallow concept of community. Like, I have a bunch of Instagram people and they're like putting cool comments. So like, yeah, community. Like, no. Nope. And I think it's more, for me, community now is like, who are the people that I choose to show up for and who shows up for me, and making sure that that is tangible and not always done out of convenience, but because it's the right thing to do. And so I think that's changed for me. And then grace has really changed for me over the last couple of years, because I don't think it works if we keep fighting so much. Like, we still have to fight, but okay. I'm surrounded, all my neighbors here, most of them. It's really interesting where I live. It's a couple of houses of gay men, right? Like gay partners. And then everyone else is Trump voters. And the election, like my election district, it voted 75% Trump in the presidential last one, right? So like we're surrounded, and we joke about being surrounded all the time. I don't know if anyone realizes I am not a Trump voter, and I'm not, just want to make that very clear. And it's okay if you are, right? But it's like, I'm not, right? So I'm not. And, but these are people that if your car gets stuck in a ditch in the winter, they're going to be the first ones to pull it out. Like they're the people like they give us their eggs. We give them some of our mushrooms. You know what I mean? Like they're part of our community. And that, and so something I've really been thinking about is like, I don't hate that family. I don't even think they're bad people. I hate the way they vote. It scares me. It scares me that they don't see what I think I see coming down the pipeline if we vote a certain way. But can I meet them in a energy of grace? Because me putting up my hackles isn't going to get any of us anywhere, And so I really vacillate between being very frightened and wanting to fight for, especially like all my LGBTQIA plus friends, like I'm terrified for right now. And I want to bash anything that hurts them. Right. And my indigenous friends, I'm like, God, it's like if some of this, like if Kristi Noem continues to be the governor of South Dakota and Trump gets elected in, like they're afraid of being put into camps to pull them off of their land because the lands have resources. And that's something they are genuinely afraid of happening. So I think something I've been trying to figure out is how do you have grace even when the people you're trying to be graceful towards are aligning with something that you find to be so repugnant and ugly and that you fight against every day. And I don't always have the answer for that. But I don't think me being an asshole to my neighbors who I get eggs from, who like I really enjoy being with and who are having over for dinner in a few weeks, I don't think I don't think being dicks to them is the way that we get through this either. So I don't know, Ken. I don't know. There's so much non-black and white in this for me. It's so much nuance in this for me. I don't know. What do you think? You're better at this stuff than I am. You're much more eloquent about this than I am.
No, it's a journey. I think I sit a lot with this idea of reckoning. I sit a lot with this idea of what we grapple with, how we grapple, like the communities in which we grapple and reckon. And I think love is like a part that has to underscore all of it, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. Because I sit a lot with this notion of what becomes of resentment in our society. And yeah, I think love is an approach to take. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Ken.
Well, no.
That's the perfect place to stop. I love that so much. Heidi, thank you so much. I so appreciate you coming on this podcast and speaking with us. It's such a special gift that you give your time like this, and I'm very honored. Thank you so much.
I'm honored that you let me dip into your amazing platform. Thank you so much to you and your entire team.
Thank you, Heidi. All right, everybody. So we're going to close the podcast. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with Heidi. And I will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.